In most video games, the depiction of war is usually presented with heroism, combat is appealing, and there's a clear perception of right and wrong, but at the cost of lacking realistic depth to the disaster of war. Some may see the title of this video as a contradiction, that a game often called a war crime simulator would be anti-war. Well, that is exactly why this. If one is to be anti-war, one must acknowledge the true nature of war, which is avoided by the mainstream shooters and pop culture for minimal age ratings. I'm not talking about exploding limbs, but larger aspects and themes of the inhumane. I'm critical, and I wanted to talk about anti-war messaging, to be specific, in Arma. If you enjoy my content and want more, make sure to subscribe, like and share. Our new goal is to reach 5,000 subscribers. Now let us begin.
Once the enemy's armored units have been destroyed, we'll move in and seize the village. Now, no heroics, okay? No heroics, okay?
The Arma series is abundant with anti-war sentiment, as it shows the unappealing side of war. No heroics, just fragile soldiers. When you see the flash, it is already too late. You may never know where you've been shot from if you die. If you live, you may not even see the enemy, and all you can do is deliver suppressive fire into a general direction. No plan survives the first contact. You may come to a situation when you attack and one by one your teammates drop dead, and before you know it, you're the last one alive. It can be very rough combat for newcomers especially. It is uncomfortable, it is clunky, frustrating, unforgiving and terrifying. But that's the point. Combat isn't charming in reality. This kind of gameplay gives you another perspective to combat, and this is also why I fell in love with Arma. It makes you appreciate that thankfully I am not in real combat, and war should only stay in video games. Even if there's no running and gunning, it is still a game after all. It is not about instant gratification, but something deeper mainstream shooters cannot deliver.
I said it would end like this. I said innocent people were going to die.
Aside from combat, there's a lot more ugly sides to war, such as the civilian suffering. In the campaign Remnants of War, you uncover what happened to the small town called Oreo Castro, and you're shown how it is ultimately the innocent civilians that suffer in the crossfire. In one, if not the most ruthless missions in the campaign, you play as CSAT Special Forces, supposedly, and your only task is to conduct an airstrike to obliterate the town with cluster munition.
The army just wasn't able to capture the place, and Colonel Arcanteros, he did not tolerate failure.
Not only that, but in the following mission you play as an injured civilian hit by the shrapnel. It is gut-wrenching, and sadly, this is too often the case in reality. I said supposedly regarding the CSAT Special Forces, because there's no certainty it was them, as NATO brass was found from the site. This is where we come to the fog of war. Arma 3 brings forth the fog of war. The fact that truth is the first casualty of war. Nothing is black and white, and information is censored, deformed and weaponized. The fog of war can become extremely ugly, as you may never know what is entirely true, or even what is right and wrong. One may say that isn't it obvious that wars are bad? But no, it isn't, especially when wars are led through deception and false premise, which is too often the case. Much like the saying, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. This message is portrayed in the main storyline of Arma 3, as the player is supposedly a peacekeeper fighting alongside the government forces against the so-called terrorists of the Freedom and Independence Army, aka the FIA. Well, in the second part of the campaign, you happen to join the FIA to fight against the government forces, and this leads you to see the viewpoint of the guerrilla fighters in this conflict. The fog of war has meaning to multiple circumstances and is present in the thick of a firefight, when the situational awareness is not present. For example, friendly fire can easily occur when you're uncertain of the exact location of friendly forces in a non-linear environment like Arma. Civilians and even animals happen to step into the zone of the crossfire, for similar reasons. I remember in Arma 2, there were often enemies surrendering, and in the heat of the combat you just happen to accidentally kill prisoners of war. And even that makes one feel guilty. These are the aspects of the chaos of combat that are not present in mainstream shooters, because who wants to kill innocents? But yet, this is the reality. Civil wars are often kept away from the mainstream shooters, because they are far more complicated and disturbing than conventional wars, because you're essentially killing your fellow countrymen, and there's a lot of gruesome unconventional warfare tactics involved. In Arma 2's campaign, Harvest Red, you don't have to play for long to realize the ugliness of civil wars, as you come across a doctor being tortured for treating the wounded enemies of those who hold him captive. You also come across an abused girl, and you're told that these rebel forces were executing everyone, even children. Only near the end of the mission do you uncover what the girl was talking about were mass graves, dug by the very same civilian prisoners and those whose bodies are lying in the pit. Oh, I even forgot that you have the option to call in an airstrike onto the village that would cause massive civilian casualties. And all of this is in the first mission alone. You can probably imagine what it's like to experience this for someone who's sanitized by the mainstream shooters, not to mention after experiencing the clunky and rough combat of Arma. It is quite the cultural shock. These are just a few of many examples of how Arma sends an anti-war message. After all of this, you can probably understand the motto of Arma 3, "This is war," and how it is not a glorification of war. Arma may look like that on the surface, but it is the exact contrary, as it has an underlying message, a message that says, let violence stay in video games as a museum of the past, not in the future of reality. If you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe to show your support. Share this video and let's try to reach our goal of 5,000 subscribers. Thanks for watching, this is Critical, out.